The Zephyrian Dominion had ruled every star and planet in the galaxy for 500,000 years. Their massive silver ships moved through space like death itself, bringing fear to any world that dared to resist. The Zephyrians were tall, pale creatures with large black eyes that could reach into minds and break the will of entire populations with just a thought. On their capital world of Zeph Prime, the High Council met in their crystal tower that stretched beyond the clouds. The room was filled with floating screens showing maps of conquered worlds, tribute payments, and slave populations. High Commander Vex Thule, the oldest of their kind, studied a small holographic display with mild curiosity. "A new world has been detected," he announced, his voice entering the minds of the other council members without sound. "Sector 7749. They call themselves humans. Primitive creatures who have just learned to travel between stars." The other council members barely looked up from their own displays. Another backward planet to be added to their collection. The process was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force, demonstrate their power, accept the inevitable surrender, and install governors to oversee the new slaves. "Send the usual fleet," commanded Council Leader Mordak without interest. "Admiral, Kindar can handle another simple conquest." But Admiral Kindar, veteran of 10,000 campaigns, felt something strange as his fleet approached the small blue and green world. His psychic senses, which could normally read the thoughts of entire populations from orbit, met unexpected resistance. The planet's inhabitants possessed minds that seemed different. Captain Lee Day stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, humanity's most advanced warship. Though advanced by human standards, it was barely the size of a Zephyrian shuttle compared to the city-sized vessels now approaching Earth. His crew of 200 represented the best of humanity's space force, but they all knew this day might be their last. "Sir, the alien ships are transmitting," reported Communications Officer Park Min, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "They're demanding immediate surrender of our entire species." Lee Day looked out at the approaching fleet. Each enemy ship could probably destroy Earth's entire navy single-handedly, but something deep in his heart refused to accept defeat without a fight. "Tell them we respectfully decline," he said calmly. The response came immediately. A wave of psychic energy struck the human fleet, designed to paralyze their minds and make them helpless. This mental attack had worked on every species the Zephyrians had ever encountered. Entire civilizations had fallen to their knees, begging for mercy when this power was unleashed. But something impossible happened. The humans wavered, many crying out in pain, but they remained standing. Their thoughts remained their own. "What is this?" Admiral Kindar whispered in shock as his mental probe met resistance for the first time in centuries. "How are they still fighting?" Lee Day felt the alien presence trying to enter his mind like ice-cold fingers reaching into his skull, but his thoughts pushed back with pure human stubbornness. "All ships, open fire," he commanded. The human fleet launched their primitive kinetic weapons, simple metal projectiles fired at incredible speed. The Zephyrians had not bothered with physical shields in millennia, relying entirely on energy barriers designed to stop laser and plasma weapons. The metal bullets punched through these defenses like they were paper. For the first time in 500,000 years, Zephyrian ships took damage from an enemy attack. The battle lasted only minutes. Half the human fleet was destroyed by the aliens' energy weapons, but 3 Zephyrian cruisers limped away with actual holes in their hulls. Admiral Kindar stared at his damaged ships in complete disbelief. As the alien fleet retreated to regroup, Captain Lee Day activated the emergency broadcast system. His message would reach every human colony, every station, every ship in human space. "This is Captain Lee Day of the Soul's Pride. Today, we faced an enemy that has conquered the entire galaxy. They came expecting us to surrender without a fight. They were wrong. We are humanity. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. And we will never, ever be slaves." The message spread through human space in hours. On Mars colonies, asteroid mining, stations, and distant research outposts, humans heard those words and felt something burning in their hearts. But the message did not stop at human borders. Alien communication networks monitored by enslaved populations across the galaxy picked up the transmission. In the slave quarters of factory worlds, in the mines of distant asteroids, in the breeding camps where conquered species were held, beings who had not spoken the word freedom in centuries heard something that changed everything. On the water world of Kepler 442b, a Thalassan named Depth Singer heard the human captain's words through the facility's communication system. For 300 years she had accepted her fate as a slave, but now, for the first time since her people's conquest, she began to plan. In the crystal mines of Zerath Prime, the enslaved Zerathi workers shared the message through their quantum-linked consciousness. The word spread like wildfire through their networks. The impossible had happened. Someone had said no to the Zephyrians and lived. On Zeph Prime, High Commander Vexthul received Admiral Kindar's report with growing anger and something he had not felt in millennia: fear. "Deploy more ships," he ordered. "This infection must be stopped before it spreads." But across the galaxy, on 1,000 enslaved worlds, beings were already beginning to remember what hope felt like. 3 months had passed since the first battle, and Earth was dying. The Zephyrians had returned with planet-killer weapons, turning half of humanity's homeworld into glass and ash. Billions were dead, but the survivors refused to give up. They scattered across the solar system like seeds in the wind, hiding in asteroid belts and abandoned space stations. Captain Kim Soo floated in the cramped bridge of his converted mining ship, now called the Hidden Blade. Around him, his crew of 30 worked quietly at stations built from salvaged parts. They had been running silent for 20 hours, dodging Zephyrian patrol ships that hunted them through the asteroid field like wolves tracking wounded prey. "Contact on long-range sensors," whispered Lieutenant Choi Bo, her voice barely audible. Speaking too loudly might give away their position to alien listening devices. "It's one of ours. Broadcasting the Freedom Code." Kim Soo allowed himself a small smile. The Freedom Code was a simple message that let human resistance cells find each other without alerting the enemy. Every day, more survivors joined their growing network of hidden bases and secret fleets. "This is Commander Yang Hoon at Taurus Base," came the transmission once they established a secure link. "I have news. The aliens are intercepting strange signals from their own territories. Other species are starting to fight back." The news spread hope through Kim Soo's crew like medicine for sick souls. Their hit-and-run attacks were working. Every ambushed supply convoy, every rescued slave transport, every successful raid against Zephyrian outposts sent the same message across the galaxy. The masters could bleed. Far away on the ocean world of Kepler 442b, Depth Singer moved carefully through the underwater slave facility where she had worked for 3 centuries. The Thalassan's forearms were perfectly designed for the delicate electronic work the Zephyrians demanded, but tonight she used them for something else entirely. The human transmission was real, she whispered to her fellow workers in their native language of clicks and bubbles. They truly fought back and survived. Around her, other Thalassans stopped their endless labor for the first time in decades. Hope was a dangerous thing for slaves, but once it started growing, it was impossible to kill. "What can we do?" asked Current Rider, an old male whose fins had been clipped to prevent escape attempts. "We are few and they are mighty." "The humans were few also," Depth Singer replied. "But they said no." High above the ocean floor, Zephyrian Overseer Kelmoth noticed the decreased productivity in Sector 7, but attributed it to equipment failure. He had ruled this facility for 200 years and never suspected that the slaves might be capable of organized thought. Meanwhile, Major Han Buell led her strike team through the maintenance tunnels of a Zephyrian orbital platform. Her squad of 12 humans moved like ghosts using captured alien technology to mask their heat signatures and mental patterns. They had learned much in 3 months of desperate warfare. "Target acquired," she whispered into her communicator. Below them lay the main computer core that controlled the slave facilities on 3 different worlds. Destroying it would free millions of beings, but more importantly, it would prove that the Zephyrians were not invincible. The explosion lit up space for several seconds. As the platform died, emergency broadcasts went out across the sector. But not the kind the Zephyrians expected. Hidden transmitters placed by the human strike team sent a different message to every world in the system. Freedom is possible. The chains can be broken. Rise up. On Kepler 442b, Depthsinger heard those words and made her choice. When the Zephyrian guards came for their daily inspection, they found the facility's workers had vanished into the deep ocean trenches where no alien technology could follow. The uprising spread like fire through dry grass. On the mining world of Zerath Prime, the crystalline Zerathi workers used their quantum-linked minds to coordinate a perfect rebellion. They took control of their facilities in minutes, turning mining equipment into weapons and communication, arrays into broadcasting stations. Captain Lee Day, now promoted to Admiral of the growing human resistance fleet, received reports from across the galaxy. Species that had been silent for centuries were suddenly fighting back. The impossible was happening everywhere at once. "Sir, we're getting requests for assistance from 47 different systems," reported Intelligence Officer Park High. "They're asking for human tactical support." Lee Day studied the star charts with amazement. 3 months ago, humanity had been alone against the galaxy's greatest empire. Now they were becoming teachers and leaders for countless rebellions. "Send coordination teams to every system that asks," he ordered. "But remember, we're not their new masters. We're their partners in freedom." The first joint human-alien operation targeted the slave processing center at Rigel 7. Captain O-Min led a mixed fleet of human fighters and Thalassan submarines through the planet's atmosphere, while Zerathi hackers disabled the orbital defenses from within. The battle was fierce but brief. When the smoke cleared, 10 million slaves walked free for the first time in their lives. As they looked up at the mixed fleet of liberation ships, many wept with joy they had thought lost forever. But the most important moment came when Depthsinger approached Captain O-Min after the victory. The Thalassan leader carried a simple message that would echo across the galaxy. "You kept your promise," she said in broken human language. "Freedom is real." Within days of the Kepler 442b liberation, 6 more systems declared independence from the Dominion. The 500,000-year reign of terror had its first cracks, and they were spreading fast. On Zeph Prime, High Commander Vexathul stared at reports of rebellion with growing rage and fear. For the first time in millennia, the Zephyrian Empire was truly threatened. The spark had become a flame, and the flame was spreading across the stars. Admiral Lim Wu stood in the command center of Haven Station, a massive Zephyrian outpost that the rebellion had captured just 2 weeks ago. The station's original name had been something unpronounceable that meant eternal submission in the alien language. The rebels had painted over those words with a simple message in dozens of languages. Freedom lives here. Around him, the most incredible sight in galactic history was taking place. Representatives from over 50 different species worked side by side at control stations designed for their former masters. Thalassan technicians with their 4 arms moved gracefully between computer terminals, while crystalline Zerathi used their quantum minds to process data faster than any machine. Floating energy beings called luminals provided power directly from their bodies, and the nomadic Vortani shared star charts of secret routes they had hidden for millennia. "The Dominion is pulling back their frontier fleets," reported Intelligence Officer Park High, her fingers dancing across an alien interface that had taken her weeks to master. "But they're also preparing something big. Our Zerathi allies detected massive energy buildups at their core worlds." Lim Wu nodded grimly. Success had come faster than anyone expected, but that also meant the real war was just beginning. The rebellion now controlled over 200 star systems, but the Zephyrian Empire still held thousands more. "Any word from Captain O-Min's fleet?" he asked. "The Rigel operation was a complete success," Park High replied with a smile. 3 more slave processing centers destroyed, and we captured enough supplies to outfit 50 new ships. The rebellion's greatest strength was its diversity. Each freed species brought unique abilities that the Zephyrians had never learned to counter. The aquatic Thalassans could hide entire fleets in the oceans of water worlds, completely invisible to orbital sensors. The Zerathi's crystal-based technology could hack into Zephyrian computer systems faster than the aliens could adapt their defenses. The energy-based luminals could overload enemy shields by direct contact, while the nomadic Vortani knew hyperspace routes that didn't appear on any official star chart. But it was human leadership that tied everything together. Where other species had learned to follow orders or die, humans had spent their entire history fighting each other and learning from their mistakes. They understood strategy, logistics, and most importantly, how to inspire others to fight for something greater than themselves. Captain Omin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the New Dawn, watching a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen prepare for battle. Human destroyers flew alongside Thalassen bioships that looked like giant sea creatures. Zarathi vessels sparkled like jewels next to the energy clouds that housed luminal warriors. And scattered throughout the formation were ships from dozens of smaller species, each adding their own strengths to the whole. "Target approaching," announced her tactical officer, a young Vortani named Windwalker, whose people had been enslaved for 60,000 years. The Arcturus system, home to the largest weapons manufacturing facility in this sector. The battle plan was complex but elegant. Thalassen ships would attack from below the system's plane, using their stealth technology to avoid detection. Zarathi, hackers would disable the orbital platforms while human fighters provided cover. Meanwhile, luminal beings would infiltrate the facility's power core and overload it from within. "All ships, this is Captain Omin," she broadcast to the mixed fleet. "Today we don't just strike a blow for freedom, we prove that unity is stronger than tyranny. For every world that dreams of tomorrow," the response came in dozens of languages, but the meaning was universal. Beings who had been enemies for millennia, forced to fight each other for their master's entertainment, now stood together against their common oppressor. The battle lasted 8 hours and ended in complete victory. But more importantly, it sent a message across the galaxy. The rebellion wasn't just a human uprising anymore. It had become something much larger and more dangerous to the old order. On the slave world of Kepler 438c, a Scorvian mining supervisor, named Stonebreaker, heard about the Arcturus victory through the underground communication network the rebels had established. His people had been enslaved for so long that most had forgotten they were once a proud warrior race. But as he looked at the humans and their alien allies working together as equals, something stirred in his heart. "Gather the others," he told, his fellow workers. "It's time to remember who we used to be." Similar conversations were happening on thousands of worlds. The rebellion's success was creating a chain reaction that the Zephyrians couldn't stop. Every victory inspired 10 more uprisings. Every freed world became a base for liberating others. Dr. Yoon-jin worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research vessel New Hope, analyzing captured Zephyrian technology with a team of scientists from 20 different species. Together, they had made breakthroughs that would have taken centuries for any single species to achieve alone. "The power source is biological," she explained to Admiral Lim Wu during their daily briefing. "They're somehow using the life force of enslaved populations to amplify their psychic abilities. That's how they maintain control over trillions of beings across the galaxy." The revelation was both horrifying and hopeful. If the Zephyrians' power came from their slaves, then every world the rebellion freed made the empire weaker. Within 6 months of the first human victory, the rebellion controlled 500 star systems and had inspired uprisings on 1,000 more. Ancient species that had accepted slavery as their eternal fate were suddenly remembering concepts like dignity and self-determination. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed eternal and unchangeable, was cracking under pressure from within and without. The growing rebellion had become an avalanche that threatened to bury 500,000 years of tyranny under the simple but powerful idea that all beings deserved to be free. Emperor Morthkul had not left his throne ship in 50,000 years. The massive vessel was larger than most moons, a dark world of metal and crystal that had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations. From his seat of power at the ship's heart, surrounded by screens showing every corner of his empire, he watched his perfect order crumble. "Half the outer rim has fallen to rebellion," his aide reported, trembling as the Emperor's psychic presence pressed against his mind like a crushing weight. "The human infection spreads faster than we can contain it. Our governors report that even loyal worlds are beginning to question our authority. The Emperor's ancient face, pale and lined with centuries of absolute power, twisted with rage. In 500,000 years of rule, no species had ever posed such a threat. Not the warrior races who fought bravely but predictably. Not the technological species who built clever weapons but lacked the will to use them. These humans were different. They made others believe that freedom was possible. Then we will end this disease at its source, Morthkul declared, his voice echoing through the minds of every Zephyrian in the fleet. Deploy the world breakers. Let the galaxy remember why they fear us. On the research vessel New Hope, Dr. Yoon Jin stared at her latest discovery with a mixture of excitement and horror. Around her, scientists from dozens of species worked at equipment salvaged from captured Zephyrian facilities. Together they had solved the greatest mystery in galactic history, the psychic amplification stations. She explained to the rebellion leadership over a secure communication link. They're hidden throughout the galaxy, usually built inside asteroids or dead moons. The Zephyrians use them to channel the mental energy of enslaved populations, turning billions of minds into a weapon. Admiral Lim Wu studied the star charts Dr. Yoon Jin had provided. Red dots marked the locations of confirmed amplification stations, while yellow dots showed suspected sites. There were hundreds of them, forming a network that spanned the entire galaxy. That's how they maintain control over so many worlds with relatively few ships, he realized. They're using our own people's minds against us. Exactly, Dr. Yoon Jin confirmed. But there's hope. A defecting Zephyrian technician gave us the access codes. If we can coordinate simultaneous strikes on enough stations, their entire network might collapse. The plan was incredibly ambitious. Admiral Cho Young would need to coordinate attacks on 50 different targets at exactly the same moment, using rebel fleets scattered across thousands of light years. The timing had to be perfect, or the surviving stations would simply increase their power to compensate for the losses. But before the plan could be implemented, Emperor Morthkul made his move. The first target was New Babylon, a recently liberated world where humans and Thalassans worked together to build a new kind of society. The population was celebrating their first year of freedom when the sky turned white with destructive energy. When the light faded, nothing remained but cooling glass where cities had once stood. The message was broadcast to every world in the rebellion. Submit or share this fate. The second target was Zerath Prime, the crystal world where the rebellion's most advanced technology was being developed. The third was Haven Station itself, humanity's greatest symbol of multi-species cooperation. Both were reduced to atoms in minutes. The galaxy watched in horror as 3 thriving worlds simply ceased to exist. But the Emperor's brutality had an unexpected effect. Instead of terrifying the rebellion into surrender, it filled every free being with burning rage. They've shown their true nature, Captain Kim Soo told his crew as they prepared for what might be their final mission. They're not rulers, they're destroyers. They would rather kill everyone than let anyone be free. Across the galaxy, neutral, worlds that had stayed out of the conflict suddenly declared for the rebellion. Ancient species that had accepted slavery for millennia rose up in fury. The Emperor's demonstration of power had become a rallying cry for every being who valued life over tyranny. Admiral Cho Young commanded the largest fleet in galactic history as it prepared for Operation Breakthrough. Ships from every free world gathered at the staging areas, their crews united by grief for the dead and determination to prevent more massacres. All stations report ready, announced Communications Officer Lee Min from the flagship Soul's Vengeance, named in honor of humanity's destroyed homeworld. We have confirmation from rebel cells in 50 star systems. They're standing by for synchronized assault. The attack began at exactly the same moment across half the galaxy. While Cho Young's fleet struck at the heavily defended stations, smaller rebel teams hit unguarded facilities using intelligence provided by defecting Zephyrians who had grown sick of their own empire's cruelty. The results exceeded everyone's hopes. As the amplification network collapsed, something miraculous happened throughout Zephyrian space. On slave worlds where beings had been mentally controlled for centuries, millions of minds suddenly became clear for the first time in their lives. Factory workers stopped their endless labor and looked around in confusion. Soldiers who had been forced to fight for their oppressors suddenly remembered they had families and homes worth protecting. Governors who had ruled through psychic compulsion found their commands ignored by populations who could finally think for themselves. "The network is down," Dr. Yoon-jin reported, her voice filled with amazement as she watched the data streams. "Psychic control across half the empire has been broken. Billions of beings are free to choose their own thoughts." Emperor Morthkul felt his power drain away like water through broken glass. For the first time in millennia, he was truly afraid. The tide had finally turned. The age of freedom had begun. The largest fleet in galactic history surrounded the dark world of Zeph Prime like a storm of stars. General Park Sung stood on the bridge of the flagship Freedom's Call, watching the tactical displays with amazement. Ships from over 1,000 different worlds had answered the call for the final assault. Ancient enemies flew side by side, united by their shared dream of freedom. "Every species that has ever tasted liberty is here," Park Sung said to his staff, officers. "Look at them all." The fleet was beautiful and terrible to behold. Sleek human destroyers moved alongside massive Thalassen bioships that pulsed with living light. Crystalline Zarathi vessels sparkled like jewels next to the energy clouds housing luminal warriors. Former slave races that had been enemies for millennia now fought as brothers against their common oppressor. In the lower decks of the flagship, Captain Kim Soo prepared his assault team for the ground invasion. His soldiers came from dozens of worlds, each carrying weapons designed by their own species but modified with technology shared freely among the rebellion. They had trained together for months, learning to fight as one people despite their different forms and abilities. "Remember," Kim Soo told his mixed battalion as they checked their equipment one final time, "we're not going in there for revenge. We're going in there to end this war and build something better." The space battle began at dawn on Zeph Prime, though the planet had no sun and knew only artificial light. Without their psychic network, the Zephyrian fleet fought like individual ships instead of a unified force. Their coordination crumbled under the focused assault of beings who had everything to lose and everything to gain. Admiral Lim Wu coordinated the attack from his command ship, watching centuries of oppression finally meet its match. The Zephyrian vessels were still powerful, but they fought with desperation instead of the cold confidence that had terrorized the galaxy for 500,000 years. "Their central command ship is breaking apart," reported Tactical Officer Choi. "Po. All remaining enemy vessels are retreating to the planet's surface." The orbital battle lasted only 3 hours. When it ended, the rebellion fleet held complete control of space around Zeph Prime. Now came the harder part. Storming the fortress where Emperor Morthkul had ruled for longer than most species had existed. Captain Kim Soo led the first wave of landing craft through the planet's toxic atmosphere. The surface of Zeph Prime was a nightmare of twisted metal and dark crystal, shaped by millions of years of absolute power. The Emperor's palace rose from the center like a black mountain, its walls covered with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The ground assault was fierce but brief. Zephyrian guards, without their psychic abilities to control minds, discovered that fear worked both ways. When faced with soldiers who fought for something greater than themselves, the ancient oppressors broke and ran. Kim Soo and his team fought their way through corridors that had not seen battle since the palace was built. The walls were covered with trophies from conquered worlds, reminders of civilizations that had been crushed beneath Zephyrian boots. But today, those same civilizations were fighting back. They found Emperor Morthkul in his throne room, a vast chamber at the heart of the palace. The being who had ruled the galaxy for 500,000 years sat on a chair carved from a single black crystal, looking ancient and fragile without his psychic powers. Around his throne lay the broken remains of the machines that had once amplified his will across countless star systems. "You cannot destroy us," the Emperor wheezed, his voice barely audible after millennia of speaking directly into minds. "We are eternal. We are order. Without us, the galaxy will fall into chaos." Kim Soo stepped forward, his weapon lowered but ready. Behind him stood representatives of every major species in the rebellion, proof that cooperation was stronger than domination. You weren't order, Kim Soo said quietly. You were fear. And fear always ends when people find the courage to stand up. The Emperor's death was not violent or dramatic. He simply stopped breathing, as if the act of being defeated had drained the last of his life force. With his passing, the last of the psychic control network flickered and died forever. News of the Emperor's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On worlds that had known only slavery, populations looked up at the stars and saw hope instead of terror. The nightmare that had lasted 500,000 years was finally over. In the weeks that followed, representatives from every free world gathered on Haven Station to create something new. The Galactic Freedom Council would govern not through force but through cooperation. Each species would keep their independence while working together for the common good. When offered leadership positions in the new government, the humans surprised everyone by refusing roles of absolute authority. We didn't fight to become new masters, Admiral Lim Wu explained to the assembled delegates. We fought so that no one would ever be a master again. Freedom means everyone has a voice, not just the strongest. The galaxy's long nightmare was over. After 500,000 years of tyranny, dawn had finally come to countless worlds. Children who had been born in slavery would grow up free. Species that had been enemies would become friends. And humanity, having sparked the revolution that freed the stars, took their place not as rulers, but as guardians of liberty. The age of freedom had begun, and it would never end.